Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order, that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby convene this special meeting of Council at 3:02 p.m. in order to consider the following matter: West Perry Sound Pool and Recreation Center project. Could I have a motion from Councillor Moffat?
Also move that motion, Mayor.
And seconded by Councillor Cole.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Thank you. Before we begin this meeting, we'd like to honor and thank our community partners of the First Nations and the Anishinaabe. And I want to remind everyone that this meeting will be dedicated to information and discussion related exclusively to the West Perry Sound Wellness Center and Pool Complex. Jason is going to present an overview, and after his presentation, we will open discussion topic by topic in the order in which he has presented them. All of this discussion will be in open, except for the portions related to land use, for which we will move into a closed meeting. As you know, advocates for a swimming pool became vocal over 20 years ago. 2 feasibility studies were completed in 2003 and 2008, respectively, and none proceeded. Following the 2018 election, the 7 area municipalities began the process again, and in November 2019, a grant application was made to the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program by all 7 municipalities. This requested 73% of the estimated capital cost of building the Wellness Center. The application was successful at both the provincial and federal levels, with a joint commitment of $23.5 million. The 7 municipalities are left to fund the remaining $8.5 million amongst ourselves. A total of 8 formal meetings of the West Perry Sound Committee have been held since October 2019, in addition to almost weekly meetings of the CAO Steering Committee. With the exception of 1 meeting, all have been open to the public and recorded. With the exception of 1 meeting, I attended all of the meetings, and Councillor Coles attended some. I did not keep a record of who else from Seguin Council attended these meetings. Today we want to review the agreements that have been reached throughout the past 2 years, many of which came to this Council for agreement through resolutions. These included the governance structure, the official ICIP application, the conceptual design, and the funding formula. After Jason's presentation, I will recognize each councillor once on each topic as we move through the areas of interest. I will only recognize you a second time on each topic after all of the other councillors have spoken on that topic. So please organize your input and ask questions only on the subject being discussed at that time. Before we begin, I want to recognize the quality and quantity of work that has been put into the West Perry Sound Pool and Wellness Center by all of the area CAOs and the Citizens Advisory Committee. Quite simply, these 2 groups have brought this project to where it is today. Thank you for the many hours and passion you've dedicated to the Wellness Center and Pool Complex. So now I ask if there's any disclosure of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof from any member of Council. Seeing none, we will proceed to the business, and Jason has the floor.
Thank you, Worship, members of Council. Good afternoon. My distinct pleasure to be here with you today to discuss the West Perry Sound Area Recreation and Culture Center and provide an overview of where we're at, as you mentioned, Your Worship, and here to answer any questions along the way. And I first want to appreciate your comments, Your Worship, around I'll work through this presentation. It is compartmentalized, as you'll see in the agenda, and I'm happy to answer questions along the way if it's about clarity, but if we can save any questions till the end, we'll make sure we have lots of time available to answer Council questions. So if you'll all just hang tight for a second, I'm going to share my screen. I do have a presentation for you.
we go.
Sorry, I'm just gonna fly backwards here, sorry. There we go. So before I get started here, I'm joined today by our Deputy Clerk, Andrea Spinney, is clerking today's meeting. Mr. Jeffrey's on holidays. Michelle Fraser is also here, your Chief Financial Officer, supporting today's presentation. So, as I mentioned, here's what I intend on walking us through for both the open and closed sessions. For the open session, I'll give you some background history. We'll talk a little bit about the facility, programming and amenities, facility management. I will share what public consultation has been undertaken, and we'll talk about next steps. Share a little bit about the governance structure that's proposed, an update on the federal and provincial funding. We'll review financial implications and talk about fundraising and the next steps. After that, we'll move into a closed session where we will talk about land acquisition update.
We have a question from Councillor Moffat.
Yep.
Councillor Moffat, is this for clarification?
No, I'm just trying to figure out, do we have all our council members, or is someone in the lobby, or I can't see the screen anymore, so I'm just trying to find out.
We're all here.
Okay, Rod, Councillor Osborne and Fellner are with us?
Yep.
Yes, they are.
Oh, okay, okay, good, thanks.
So the West Perry Sound Area Joint Partners have developed a plan to build a unique recreation, culture, and pool center to fill a community service gap within the district. The joint partnership includes 7 area municipalities and 2 First Nations communities, including the Township of the Archipelago, Carling Township, McDougall Township, McKellar Township, the Town of Perry Sound, Seguin Township, the Municipality of Whitestone, Wasasking, I know I made a mistake there, and Shawnigat Indigenous communities. The new facility is envisioned as a unique recreation and culture center facility to meet the needs and interests of all West Perry Sound communities and encourages healthy lifestyles, social interaction, and physical well-being through education, recreation, wellness, culture, and athletic activities. There have been several iterations of this project over time, ranging from a standalone complex to a campus, including the YMCA. There have been numerous meetings and organized tours of joint YMCA municipal partnership facilities since 2010. The advice that the Wellness Center and Pool Committee has received is that in addition to the lap pool and therapeutic pool programs, the additional amenities such as a fitness center, indoor track, gymnasium, and multi-purpose space should be included in the design to create an appeal to a broader audience that will in turn create a more financially sustainable facility. Additionally, there may be an opportunity to locate other wellness-related services in close proximity to the facility. The floor space of the facility is anticipated to be approximately 49,000 square feet. In 2018, a group of residents and community leaders created a citizens ad hoc committee. The objective of the ad hoc committee was to advocate for a recreation center and pool to serve the West Perry Sound area. It was identified that to move the project forward, a decision-making model that is accountable to the public was required. A committee structure for decision-making was developed by the area CAOs, and the decision-making structure incorporates a citizen advisory committee, which replaces the citizens ad hoc committee. Within the decision-making structure, the lead committee is the Wellness Center and Pool Committee, comprised of heads of council or appointees, and the committee is supported by the steering group, which is comprised of the area CAOs. An engineering and architectural consultant RFP was issued in May 2019 and was awarded to CS&P Architects in association with Tatham Engineering in October 2019. The intent of the RFP scope was to coordinate research, information, and data gathering, analysis, in order to make recommendations to each council. These recommendations include analysis related to site selection, amenities to be included in the complex, construction cost estimates, programming, and operational costs. The RFP scope was divided into two tasks, Task 1 and Task 2. The intent of Task 1 was to review the 4 identified properties and using criteria identified in the RFP and any additional criteria that may be suggested by the consultant to make a recommendation with respect to the preferred site. Task 2 was to solicit stakeholder input on program needs, prepare design options and costing on the selected site, and create a recommended design and supporting report. Since the RFP was issued, the Provincial and Federal Grant Program, ICIP, was launched. That's the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program. The decision was made to submit an application for the Community Culture and Recreation stream. A draft program and design was quickly developed for the application, and a site provisionally selected, knowing that changes will be likely made to accommodate the public input and stakeholder process that was set to follow. This funding application was approved on June 7th, 2021. After the ICIP application was submitted, the community input stage commenced, starting with the creation of the Citizens Advisory Committee. A number of meetings with the Wellness Center and Pool Steering Committee were held in the fall 2019. The intent was to develop a program and site design and using the recommended YMCA site as a basis for design. The initial design was submitted on November 12, 2019 as part of the ICIP application. After the application was made, the Citizens Advisory Committee was struck with the mandate to facilitate public consultation on the proposed recreation programming. The first meeting of the CAC was held in November of 2019, and final compiled recommendations were received in August of 2020. In summary, the CAC recommendations were as follows. They recommended a 6-lane, 25-meter pool for swim meets, a larger leisure and therapeutic pool with defined play areas, amenities, and relaxation area, a sauna off the pool deck, a gymnasium, the regulation size for competitions, and 4 pickleball courts, walking track, common areas with vending machines, viewing areas for the pool and the gymnasium on a second level for swim meets and gymnasium competitions, fitness studio, multi-purpose rooms, and countless other mentions for future considerations, including outdoor water park features, outdoor tennis courts, superior energy efficiency, charging stations for electric vehicles, and recognition of indigenous culture and local history. Updated design options were prepared to reflect the CAC's comments for review. 2 options were presented with an all-in option, which was option B, with an estimated cost of $40 million for construction, and a scaled-down version known as option A at a capital cost of $32 million. The committee decision at the meeting of October 7th, 2020 chose option A due to the lower capital costs and operating costs, as well as the sense that the needs of the public were appropriately accommodated. Option A, as depicted in this slide, includes a 4-lane pool, a therapeutic and leisure pool, fitness and studio areas, change rooms, multi-purpose rooms, and administration area. This floor plan represents 48,310 square feet. The current design that is before us today is known as a program design, intended to demonstrate what can be included and provide enough detail to develop estimated capital and operating costs. Detailed architecture and engineering will be completed as next steps in the process, and this work will reveal a detailed cost estimate for construction and a more holistic representation of the annual operating costs of the facility. The detailed design will have minor changes to accommodate budget, but will focus on the details such as building materials, mechanical and electrical systems, finishes and furnishings, all of which have impacts on the budget. The proposed $32 million budget will be the target set not to exceed, and reverse engineering will have to be done if the cost estimates are not consistent with the budget. The YMCA is widely recognized as a leader in managing these types of recreational facilities. and offering relevant, current, and excellent community programming. The YMCA has been actively engaged in the process of developing the program design of this facility and the programming intended to be offered. The area CAOs made the following recommendation to the Wellness Center and Pool Committee and ultimately to each of the 7 municipal councils. That recommendation is that the steering committee be directed to enter into negotiations with the YMCA for the purposes of operating the facility. The steering committee and the YMCA are prepared to enter into those negotiations as soon as possible. As mentioned before, a Citizens Advisory Committee was established in 2019 with the objective of engaging the residents of the West Parry Sound District to learn and understand the community needs. The CAC is comprised of 15 individuals representing a variety of interests and across the municipalities in the West Parry Sound area, including the First Nations. The CAC has met 7 times between November 2019 and August 2020. The CAC launched an online public survey in July 2020 for input into the programs and amenities desired by the public in the West Parry Sound area. The survey responses were used by the CAC in submitting its report on August 14th, 2020 to the steering committee for review and were subsequently used to help finalize the recommendations on program and design to the October 22nd, 2020 Wellness Center and Pool Committee meeting. 1,639 respondents participated in the survey, and 23% of those were from Seguin Township. A synopsis of the survey findings are as follows. The survey identified responses that provided detail on those responding, including the age group, with the majority of the respondents being between 30 and 59 years of age, followed by the 60-plus age group. Where they lived, with 23.14% of the respondents living in Seguin Township. Whether they were year-round residents or seasonal residents. What types of usage residents wanted from the pool facility, with the greatest response being for family and open swimming and aqua fitness programming. What types of usage residents wanted from the gymnasium facilities, with the greatest response being for family and open gym, followed by volleyball and supervised children's services. What types of usage residents wanted from the studio and the types of classes available, with the greatest response being for yoga, spin classes, Zumba, and weightlifting programming. Usage residents were interested in from the fitness and conditioning area, with the greatest response being for cardio equipment and a walking track. And what types of usage residents wanted to support cultural activities, with the greatest response being for cooking workshops, art workshops, craft workshops, to name a few. And the final question was simply if residents are in support of the facility or not, with 88.63% being in support of the facility and 11.37% opposed. As we consider next steps for public consultation, the CAO's group, the steering committee, intends on further engagement across the West Parry Sound District. And localized publicity to enhance Seguin engagement will be undertaken as a part of that process. And as we look towards the future and the governance structure that will manage the construction and operation of the facility, consideration to how all 7 municipalities and 2 First Nations communities will be represented has been considered. The establishment of a municipal services board is a key next step. The MSB, or Municipal Services Board, will be the governance board that is accountable for construction and operation of the facility. The MSB will be the owner of the assets, specifically land and buildings, and follows the same structure as municipal council. Municipal Services Board will consist of 1 appointee from each partner municipality and will be a member from the Municipal Council or First Nations Council. Each financially contributing member will have a weighted vote based on the cost formula rounded up to a whole number. In Seguin's case, this represents a weighted vote of 3 of the possible 13 votes. The MSB will have delegated authority to manage construction and operation of the facility and will have no authority to borrow funds. Funding remains the responsibility of the member municipalities. And should a member municipality wish to withdraw from the board, or should an additional board member wish to join the board, this can only be done with the consent of all municipalities. Moving along to updates on the federal and provincial funding. After the RFP for engineering and architecture was awarded to CS&P, the joint federal and provincial Investing in Canada Infrastructure Grant Program was launched. The decision was made to submit an application for the community, culture, and recreation stream of that funding. That application was due on November 12, 2019, and the team developed a draft program and design for the application. The YMCA site was provisionally selected to accompany this application, knowing that changes were likely to be made to accommodate the public input process that followed. Many communities across Ontario and the country made application to the ICIP grant on behalf of their townships, towns, and cities. And on June 7th, 2021, the West Perry Sound area municipalities and the 2 First Nations communities were ecstatic to learn that our joint application for 73.3% of the projected $23.5 million was approved.
Councillor Collins, do you have a clarification question?
Yes, I do, Mayor.
Go ahead.
Okay. Jason, when you were speaking about the Municipal Services Board, you were saying that was there was going to be 1 member per municipality on that board. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Then where is the 13 votes coming from?
The votes
Because
are...
it's not.
Sorry, the 7 municipalities, the weight of each vote is representative of the financial contributions. So in our case, in Seguin's case, it's about 24% of the value of the construction in our annual operating impact, our annual operating contributions.
Yes.
So, the percentage would be rounded up as a 30%. We're rounded, everybody was rounded up to the nearest number, so representing 3 votes rather than just 1.
And we are the only ones that have three votes?
No, Perry Sound has 3 votes as well, and then from there, it drops down to 2 for a couple of the municipalities and 1 for most of the other ones.
Okay, for a total of 13 votes.
For a total of 13.
Between the 7 municipalities and First Nations, is that correct?
Sorry, could you repeat that question?
Yes.
It's the 7 municipalities plus the 2 First Nations that make up the total of 13.
It is. It's the 7 municipalities plus the 2 First Nations. The 2 First Nations are non-voting members of the board.
Right. Okay. Okay, thank you very much.
So I'll pick up where I left off with respect to the federal and provincial funding. This financial injection into our community represents one of the largest investments from the federal and provincial governments into this district in over 20 years. Not only does this investment provide for a recreation and culture center and pool, it provides the district with access to modern, inclusive space for years to come, attracts new and supporting business opportunities, creates both construction jobs and ongoing employment opportunities for all ages, including our youth, and strengthens both our social and economic community into the future. The breakdown of the $32 million investment sees the Government of Canada invest nearly 40% at $12.7 million, the Government of Ontario at 33%, $10.6 million, and the remainder, $8.5 million or 27% amongst the West Perry Sound municipalities. Seguin Township's contribution of that 8.5 is $2.01 million. Of course, we all wonder, what does this mean to us, our taxes, and the impact of a new facility such as this that our community is being asked to support? As Council considers this investment, your staff will present detailed recommendations on how we move forward in future years' budgets and with Seguin's portion of the capital contributions in due course. I'll now invite Michelle Fraser, your Chief Financial Officer, to walk you through the details of this investment into the district and the projected financial impacts on Seguin's tax base.
Councillor Collins, do you have another question? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jason. So this is the current estimated capital investment of $2.013 million for Seguin. Based on a 2.5% loan or mortgage on a 25-year amortization, that would be an annual payment of $108,211, which represents a 2021 tax rate increase of 0.86%. So per 100,000 in assessment, that's $3, and the average increase for the average residential property in Seguin is $15.15. If you take that down to a 15-year amortization, it's $160,000 a year, with the increase per 100,000 of $4.47 or $22.53 per year for the average residential property. Next slide, please. Thanks. So the current operating impact based on the CS&P pro forma for Seguin is $67,500 per year, which is a tax rate increase of 0.54%. Again, $1.87 per 100,000 in assessment, or $9.45 for the average residential property. So combined, the blended impact for a 25-year amortization and the annual operating is $176,000, with a 1.4% tax rate increase per 100,000 of $488, increase for the average residential property of $24.60, and that ranges up to $31.98 on a 15-year amortization. Down below, I've run the numbers, including using $50,000 from reserves to offset some of this. So for a 25-year amortization, that ends up being $17.60 per year for the average residential property, up to $24.98 using the 15-year amortization.
Thanks, Michelle. I'm sure we'll have lots of questions on the financial component in due course. So the financial impacts outlined by your CFO are based on a full financial contribution. Of course, with any significant community project like this one, a fundraising campaign is in development. While we are in the pre-campaign planning phase, details of the campaign will be rolled out in the near future with a variety of options, including setting some fundraising goals, donor recognition, and the varying means of undertaking a fundraising campaign. Critical next steps for the project are to develop and release an RFP for a construction project manager. The project manager will report to the steering committee and provide updates and recommendations to the Wellness Center and Pool Committee and the future Municipal Services Board. The project manager will provide oversight on project execution from the current status of program design through to closure, while managing the benefits on behalf of the Municipal Services Board. The project manager will ensure the objectives are met and actively manage various stakeholder groups while leading and developing the planning process, budgets, schedule, and organizing the project from planning through to successful delivery. The project manager will provide expert guidance and oversight on the scope, cost, schedule, quality, risk, and communications of the project through design, construction, commissioning, and validation, including occupancy. This position, as I said, will be accountable to the steering committee on day-to-day activities and will support the steering committee's recommendations to the Municipal Services Board upon establishment. And as previously mentioned, Further public consultation is in development, and there will be a targeted effort to engage Seguin ratepayers to fully understand their needs and address priorities for the facility. The steering committee is finalizing the partnership agreement, which will see the creation of the Municipal Services Board in the coming months. And of course, cash flow projections were completed as part of the ICIP grant application. And the steering committee is working through how best to manage the capital contributions for the 7 municipal partners, of which a recommendation will be brought forward to council in due course that specifies Seguin's recommended pathway forward based on council's feedback. And as just mentioned, the steering group is in preparation of preparing the details of a fundraising campaign that will be launched as soon as possible. With that, Your Worship, that is my high-level overview, and I am happy to attempt to answer any questions as you see fit.
Thank you very much, Jason. I think it's a very comprehensive overview and summary, and there is a lot of background that went into that. So as I stated at the beginning of the council meeting, we will go through Jason's presentation, kind of chunk by chunk from his agenda, and I ask everyone to stick to that section as they ask questions or provide input. So at the beginning, Jason started with the background information that kind of goes back 20 years, but in detail since 2018. Are there any questions or comments on the background? I see none, so we move into the facility, which is at a conceptual level only, and it was, I'll be quite honest, it came together very quickly to meet the ICIP deadline, which landed on us quite quickly. So the first portion of his discussion on the facility was the conceptual design and the photographs, or I guess they were concept designs, they weren't photographs, of the building and the contents. Are there any comments or questions there? Councillor Fellner.
Yeah, Jason, through the mayor, can you refresh my memory, or maybe perhaps the mayor can, but the seed money that the municipalities gave to the pool committee way back when to pay for engineering, architect, that type of thing, what, do you know offhand how much was spent on each?
Well, I believe the total originally was about $75,000 between all 7 municipalities, and I believe we've actually overspent that with some of the detail of soil remediation and stuff. It came to council to say, can we up our amount? I forget whether it was from $8,000 or $10,000. So we've spent more than the 75 in total, but the 7 municipalities are kind of managing that right now. Jason, do you have anything else to add?
No, I think you covered it, Your Worship.
So I guess what my question out of that was is the money expended on the architect to date and the consultant to date, how much of that work can actually be used going forward?
Through Your Worship, I would suggest that all of it can be used. What we have is we have the footprint, we have the idea of what we're looking to build from a program perspective. There's been some early geotechnical investigation and survey work completed, all of which will inform whoever it is that will do the detailed design in the future. So there's not much of it there that is not usable. It certainly all will be of value as we move into the next phases.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on the facility? Councillor Moffat.
Sorry, I just want to go back to Councillor Fellner's comment. I thought the number was somewhere around 170, 180,000 that everyone put in. I believe that's in our portion was 22% of that amount.
Can I ask our CFO to comment on the amount that was the total? Because she was our acting CAO at the time.
I believe we put in 38,000, and that was our 22%. So yeah, the number that you have, Councillor Moffat, is about what I recall as well.
So about 170,000.
Something like that, yes.
Okay. So does that change the answer to the question from Councillor Fellner?
No, it does not, Councillor Moffat. It's still all valuable work that's been undertaken and will inform the next phases as we move forward.
Okay, so my question with regards to the facility, are we talking about the amenities or items that are included in the facility? Is that what's under this category?
Yes.
So in Jason's presentation, he mentioned about the community group recommending a 6-lane pool.
The 6-lane pool, Councillor Moffat, was recommended by the CAC, the Community Advisory Committee. However, that formed part of that all-in option when the WCPC considered the various options with a construction cost upwards of $40 million for the all-in version. So when it was scaled down, including the lanes down to a 4-lane pool. However, what I will share is that we have a proposed $32 million facility here. The budget is representative of that, but leaves in a fair amount of contingency to be able to manage the unknown factor. And cost estimates for the addition of a couple of lanes were, if I remember correctly, upwards of $800,000 to add the additional 2 lanes. Once we move into detailed design and detailed cost estimates, something such as 6 lanes may be able to be accommodated once we get to that stage.
So just as a follow-up, it would seem though that in order to boost revenue, in order to build a swimming team, in order to attract other uses, and given that the community was looking for a 6-lane pool, it would seem that, and the whole idea behind this was to have a pool first, and those other facilities were kind of secondary, that I would think that the driving force going forward should be focused on ensuring that the right pool is installed first, and maybe some of those other amenities may drop away as a result. So I'll leave it at that, and I'll pass the floor. Thank you.
Councillor Osborne.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Through you to Jason. So the figure has now been corrected. It's $170,000 worth of seed money. I understand from watching the last meeting, June 3rd, that $170,000 has been spent. There is no more money available for ancillary costs like a project manager and moving the agenda along. And there was a potential ask for more money up front from municipalities to cover more costs, preliminary costs, before tenders actually went out. Can you elaborate on how much more money would be needed, Jason, and how much that would be from Seguin to cover the costs of proceeding with the project manager, et cetera, beyond the 170 that's spent?
Through your worship, any costs going forward are now eligible under the grant. So project manager, any architectural services, engineering services are all eligible to be recouped through the grant program. At the last WCPC meeting, what was discussed was how do we manage the cash flow given that the province and the feds don't hand over all money up front. It is distributed on a monthly basis. I'm not exactly sure how frequently they distribute it, but it is distributed based on the spend. So what was discussed was the need to consider the municipal contributions being made, and in part or in whole, we haven't exactly nailed down that number yet, but some form of an advancement of the municipal contribution to be able to manage the cash flow as we work through the costs of a project manager, engineering, architecture, et cetera, into detailed design. So there would be, I gotta be careful how I say this, but there would be no new unknown additional costs. There will be new costs, but they would form a part of that capital cost that's outlined in this package today.
All right, so just to sum up on that point, that there is more work to be done by the pool committee to determine what those costs will be and what advancement for cash flow may be required. So that's still work undone?
Yes, there has been no RFP issued. We have no pricing on a project manager.
Right.
We have not tendered out for detailed design. So all of those costs, there's still some work to do, absolutely. But all those costs have not been calculated because we haven't gone out to market for pricing yet.
No, I understand. I understand that's a figure that you really can't nail down at this point. But in the meantime, how will the pool committee determine how much cash flow they need from the 7 municipalities in order to accommodate that, and when?
So a bulk of the work that needs to happen now sits on the shoulders of the area CAOs. The development of an RFP for the project manager, the development of the RFP for engineered design, architectural design, that work happens at frankly no cost other than what's already in, you know, you're paying my salary already, so any hours I'm putting to this is already accounted for. Once those RFPs are issued and we have agreement to proceed, we will then have the cost estimates of what it's going to cost. And then it's at that time that we'd be able to say, here's how much money we need to cash flow over the next period of time, and we would be able to advance from there.
Understood. Now, going to Darrell's point about the pool and the Citizens Advisory Committee, I'm not sure I know who these 15 members are, what walks of life they're from, what qualifications they had, how they were selected, why they were selected. I don't know if that information is readily available from the pool committee, but I don't recall seeing it. But I guess my point is, with regards to Darrell's comment, was if the Citizens Committee, who was tasked with providing input as to what they would like to see, had an emphasis on the pool, that being 6 lanes, and the attributed benefits to having 6 lanes, intercities, provincial swim meets, etc. Why would that be thrown out when, even though the project goes to $40 million, with all the other attributes still in, plus the 6 lane, if you take a look at the 73%, I believe it is, from the government, that would up their stake to $29.2 million, thereby leaving a differential of about 11 million instead of 8.7 or whatever. So not a big ask from the municipalities in order to accomplish the 6 lane. So I'd just like to say, if you're going to do it right. And I don't know if you can go back to ICIP with revisions and ask for more money on top of the 23 million to get to 29 to accommodate the 73% of the 40. But I don't think the Citizens Advisory Committee, which is a key component here, should be ignored when you're looking at the overall scope. And to date, it looks like it's fallen on deaf ears. I'll let you move on to the next point. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, just in terms of the Citizens Advisory Committee, the list of people is available. I don't have it at my fingertips right now. A call was put out for volunteers, first of all, and then working with the CAOs, it was, people were chosen X number from each municipality and with various kinds of expertise. Some of them were engineers, a lot of them were people who participated in swim meets as children or as parents. So that list of people is available, and I will get it to you.
Thank you.
Councillor Collins, you're next.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Jason, you were talking about the original $32 million project cost, and you also mentioned a contingency fund. What percentage is the contingency fund of the 32 million?
Based on the current program design, it's a 25% contingency.
25%?
That's correct.
All right, thank you.
Councillor Cole.
Yeah, just a quick question. curious on the development of the building itself, the conceptual design. How much attention, do you know, was paid to the potential for revenue generating users as opposed to membership? Just like something like a massage therapy studio or that kind of thing. Was there much attention paid to things other than membership?
Through your worship, what I can share is that with the creation and implementation of the multi-purpose rooms, you know that is a part of that exercise, is to be able to have rooms that can be utilized for a variety of different options, not just the membership of you know, the proposed YMCA membership. So I think to answer your question, Councillor Coles, flexibility has been built in the current design to allow for revenue generation opportunities.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Fellner and Councillor Vincent, do you have anything to add before I let people speak a second time? No, from Councillor Fellner? Councillor Vincent, do you have anything?
I don't have anything to add. I did have a financial question, but I'm not sure if it fits here.
Go ahead.
And the question was just, is the government funding 73.3% only of 32,000? Like if you
Million.
go and you get your capital expenditure and it comes out to be 40,000
Million.
right off the hop, like what do you do then? That's just my question.
The cap on the funding is 73.3% of the $32 million projected cost. So if the project was to go to $40 million, there is no additional funds coming. There is a maximum that the province and the federal government is going to contribute towards the project.
So you just have to keep within budget.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I know when part of the ICIP letter that comes back, because I've seen one before on another subject, it's non-negotiable. That's the number that they've assigned to it. Okay, Councillor Osborne, your second comment on this issue?
Yes, Councillor Coles brought up the issue of memberships versus ancillary programs. Has there been any dollar amounts publicized as to membership, day use, monthly, annual membership fees? Has any of that been discussed or publicized?
At the highest of levels, Councillor Osborne, it has been discussed. In fairness, we have a proposal in front of the 7 municipalities that we would enter into negotiations with the YMCA to operate the facility and run that membership program. There is no agreement at this time with the YMCA to proceed, so there has not been a detailed analysis of what type of programs and the costs. But that is certainly something that you know, I think frankly, in conversation you and I have had, that you know, we would want to engage with the public and understand what their wants and needs are and what they're willing to purchase for a membership or day passes, et cetera. So that will form part of the next phase of public consultation.
All right, in response to that, Mayor, you said at the highest level, and it appears that a lot of decisions here have been made at 30,000 feet. I would think that public consultation would include some idea of what it costs to be a member of such an organization in order to get a good sampling of how many people would participate in use. If it's $10 a month, that's one thing. You'd probably get a different result than if it's $30 a month. Why that question was never answered, I can't understand. And I would strongly suggest when we do our own Seguin consultation that we base our survey with some costing involved, because would you pay $100,000 for a Chevy? You know, it's a question with unanswered questions. So I just don't know how you can do a judgment, even though the sampling, as small as it was, 1,639 responses, 379 from Seguin is pretty pitiful from the catchment area we have. And I can understand why. How would I answer the question if I don't know what it's going to cost to join? Anyway, I think that's a key problem. Thank you.
Go ahead. There were some estimates in the ICIP application. I believe they were constructed based on other pools about the number of people that would join. But they were, as Jason said, very high level because they were needed in the ICIC application that came to council. But I agree with you.
So Mayor,
We need,
if I were to ask you what it costs for a membership in Gravenhurst or Wasaga Beach, would you have an inkling, an annual membership for swimming and other? You would?
for a family to join at the Bracebridge Y is between $300 and $400, depending on whether you'd have lessons or not,
Per what?
for family,
For how long?
a year.
A year. Okay. So the public though hasn't been made aware of what you know and what I now know. I think it's time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Moffat, you're next.
Thank you. I'm not sure if this fits into here, but I think it does. My question is, there was a comment that was made, and this has been well known, that sort of, green energy, renewable kind of ideas would get pushed down the curve, and we would deal with them at a later stage. So my question revolves around, how are we heating this facility? If it is natural gas, do we have assurances that we have sufficient natural gas to heat this facility? And have those costs, given that there is no infrastructure out to the current Y location, have those costs been factored into the estimates? Or will that form part of the more detailed engineering that would come forward, such that your 25% contingency would get, some of that would get utilized to cover, some of these currently unknown knowns or unknown unknowns? Thank you.
Just quickly, Your Worship, great question, Councillor Moffat, and you're absolutely correct that the detailed design will flush out any of those types of costs. There's a good reason for there being a contingency of 25% because some of that work is yet to be done. We don't know what's heating the facility. We don't know what's cooling the facility. We don't know the makeup of the materials, the building materials yet. And so it's a little too early to be able to determine whether or not we have sufficient gas supply, but those are the details that'll get worked out in the future.
Just as a, sorry, Mayor, just as a follow-up, I guess I'm surprised that the idea of how the facility would be heated at this stage of the game would be an unknown. So I recognize that we're still in the concept phase, but it's a big piece of that because it should be part of the infrastructure costs. If the facility was to be moved or located at the Y, which does not have any water or sewer or anything else, I'm surprised that would be a miss in the current estimates. Thank you.
If I can just expand on my previous answer to Councillor Moffat, in the construction cost estimates at this current design level, there is a fairly significant portion of that money which is for servicing the property, servicing the facility. So not to suggest that there is no provisions for servicing, just to suggest that those numbers need revision as we get into detailed design.
Thank you.
Councillor Collins.
Thank you, Mayor. Jason, when you brought up the actual YMCA managing the facility, it just brought up a couple of red flags with me. Because they're in Chapter 11 right now, and that the YMCA on a provincial level is on the verge of bankruptcy. And I'm just wondering what the financial stability is of the YMCA in Parry Sound. Thank you.
I can't speak on behalf of the YMCA, but I don't mind speaking about the YMCA right now. I've had the opportunity to spend quite a bit of time in meetings and discussion with the YMCA's new CEO. They have felt the effects of COVID, perhaps more than many industries have, in a negative way. But as they continue to shift and pivot and rebuild their programming and make the decisions that they've made. And they've made some very tough decisions. They've had to dispose of some fairly significant parcels of land and buildings. But what I can share is that as they consider their reopening plan and their recovery plans, the Parry Sound area, with or without this facility, is a priority in their reopening plans. I think this facility is exciting to them. It's a great opportunity, and any of their partnerships with other municipalities continue to be strong, and they are very much looking forward to working with us, meaning the West Parry Sound District, with this project and any other projects on a go-forward basis. So what I'm saying is this area continues to be a priority for them.
You're on mute, Councillor Collins.
Then from a business perspective, more than anything else. Right?
Correct.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
And I can report too that the YMCA, which is part of YMCA Simcoe Muskoka in Parry Sound, their job and employment center is busy and growing, and they were the lead partner really in the transportation study that's being done now. So they're certainly investing in the area from an employment support basis.
And I think, if I can, Your Worship, one of the unique features when you look at some of the other areas is the proximity to other Y facilities, Y programming, where they are closing down perhaps options. And I'm not speaking on their behalf. I'm just theorizing, if you'll indulge me for a moment, is, there's likely service offerings in close proximity to those areas already. Here in the West Parry Sound District, the closest offerings are hundreds of kilometers and a round trip away, and so that's why I think you see the priority being placed here, is that they want to stay established and provide that community service locally.
Thank you. I see no further questions regarding the facility and programming and amenities. So we've slipped in a couple places onto the public consultation. We've heard from Councillor Osborne that he would like the public consultation to include some costing and that type of thing. And I'll call on other people on the public consultation. I do want to point out that in Jason's presentation, when he referred to public consultation, he was referring to public consultation for all of the district of West Parry Sound, not just for the Township of Seguin, that it would be all 7 municipalities. So, Councillor Osborne, you have a comment? Councillor Osborne,
Sorry, I was muted. I don't know if this question's been answered yet or not, but negotiations, I think, was commented by Jason that negotiations are still underway with the YMCA about management. Is that correct?
My comment, Councillor Osborne, was that we are prepared to enter into negotiations as soon as possible. However, until such time as the details of council support from all 7 municipalities are approved, we have not entered into those discussions. But both the YMCA and the steering group are ready to have those discussions as soon as we possibly can.
Well, in response to your comment, I understood that negotiations have been ongoing for months with the YMCA, but that their board had to discuss this to determine whether or not they're willing to sell. Now, selling the property versus leasing was one issue. Management was a second issue. I understand those negotiations were underway, but now I'm hearing that until all the municipalities are on board, those negotiations won't start. Which is it?
No, Councillor Osborne, I believe if you look at the actual wording in the CAO's report, he included the resolution from the YMCA's board that they are prepared on the land, and they are looking forward to...
Sorry, Councillor, Your Worship, we're waiting into the closed session discussions here about land.
Okay.
I think what your question originally was, Councillor Osborne, is around the facility management.
Yes.
So I don't want to convolute the two. I want to keep them very separate.
Okay.
We have not had discussions with the YMCA in detail about the facility management There have been plenty of discussions with the YMCA, which I'm happy to provide an update once we move into closed session. But
Gotcha.
with respect to facility management, until such time as we are prepared to have those discussions, they've been on hold.
All right, just to follow up on that, if I may, Mayor, should the negotiations on management with the Y not succeed, we would need to go out to another management company or go elsewhere in order to get an idea of what that would cost outboard, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Collins.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Getting back to what we were originally being asked about public consultation, is that where we're at right now, that section?
That's correct.
Uh,
Yes.
Okay, to me, it is imperative that we have public consultation with Seguin residents. This has to be addressed. No ifs, ands, or buts, as far as I'm concerned. It is imperative. Thank you.
Thank you, and I think the CAOs agree across all municipalities. I see no further issues on public consultation, so we move into the topic of governance, which is really the Municipal Services Board and how it would operate. So Councillor Moffat, you kick it off.
Thank you. In the presentation, there was numerous references to the First Nations, Indigenous groups, and I'm a little unclear as to what they're in for or support they're in for. Is this by name only, or maybe there's some clarification as to how they are parties? I know you mentioned, Jason, that they don't have a vote at the table of the 13 votes that are out there. So what exactly are the First Nations and Indigenous groups in on for this project, please?
Each of the First Nations will have a seat on the board, and as I mentioned, a non-voting seat. So they would be there to contribute their feedback, participate in the discussions around the programming and the amenity offerings, the program offerings into the future. But because they're a non-financial contributing groups, they will not have a vote. They would not be able to direct the allocation of funds because they're not contributing funds. And that's, I think, fundamentally what we're saying here is we welcome everyone onto the board, and we welcome everybody's feedback, but when it comes to decision time around allocation of funds, the First Nations groups would not have a vote in those decision-making times.
So just as a follow-up, then you also mentioned in order to change the agreements, you would need 100% vote for that change, which would mean that if one of the First Nations, Indigenous groups wanted to come in, or if one of the municipalities wanted to go out, that vote would have to happen. Again, presuming that someone's coming to the table with money, that vote would have to have happened, and all 13 votes would have to be cast in order to change that agreement.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Fellner.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. Jason, so in the Municipal Services Corporation, I think is what you call them, what role are the CAO, municipal CAOs going to play?
So it's a municipal services board, not a municipal services corporation. They're two similar but distinctly different organizational structures. So this is a board, not a corporation. The CAOs will be advisors, participants in the meetings. The CAOs will be right there with the committee working, or the board working to advance the objectives, but primarily in an advisor role.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Collins.
Thank you, Mayor. maybe we should have had this municipal services board when the feds handed down the Parry Sound Airport to us, eh? The 7 municipalities, I think that was the last time the 7 municipalities in our area got together with an agreement to run the Parry Sound Airport. And as we move further in this, with this business proposal with the other 7 municipalities, already there's been changes at the Whitestone level, changes at the McKellar level, even changes with Carling. My main concern, I want to state right now that I am for a wellness center. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. For a regional facility as what we've been talking about. But my main concern is everybody dropping out. And they have done in the past. And this was we just experienced this again with the expansion of the Parry Sound Airport, where we're 50% owners with Parry Sound, and we're still coming up with 80% of the costs. And when it came to expanding the runway, Parry Sound said, we haven't got any money and we have to do it on our own. I hope this doesn't happen moving forward, because that is going to be a real thorn in our taxpayers' sides. So I had to say that because we've lived it, and we're not going to be paying the lion's share on this. I can tell you that right now, because that isn't going to happen. So I hope that there's some kind of binding contracts between the municipalities when we get involved in this. Thank you.
I'll briefly address that, Councillor Collins, and appreciate your comments. The Municipal Services Board will be formed with an agreement. We have a lawyer preparing the agreement for when we're ready to go. So this is, to your point, it'll be binding, and it will require, as just previously discussed, it will require the consent of all municipalities if someone wants to step away.
Thank you. Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Mayor. Jason, I think at the top of your presentation, you mentioned that the location of the new facility is still, I forget how it was worded, but
Councillor Osborne, we're going to discuss location enclosed because it has land implications. So
okay. Well,
I hold that comment until we go into closed.
So we can't talk about site selection either?
No, and not in
Okay,
open.
very good. Thank you. Will do.
Councillor Moffat. But hang on, before I acknowledge you, is there anybody else? Councillor Finson, Councillor Coles that have a comment on governance? No. Okay, Councillor Moffat.
Thank you, Mayor. I was waiting my turn. I just want to go back to an earlier comment from Councillor Collins. We know that Whitestone has, in their resolution, only agreed to a 10-year financial commitment. So how does that resolution at this time impact the Municipal Services Board, whereby it seems that they are not quite in, and therefore at the end of that 10 years, and I recognize that's a long way away, but I got to imagine when the lawyers are drafting the agreement, they need to take that into consideration now. So has that been considered? And also Councillor Collins mentioned McKellar. I'm not aware of I've heard rumblings that McKellar may be doing something similar, but I'm just wondering how that impacts, sort of the 13 votes kind of all in, financially, everything else at this stage when there's some leakage.
Through your worship, there certainly is a lot of unknowns that we're working through here, and part of this is, part of the intent of this discussion is that it leads to some direction from Seguin Council, not necessarily today. Today's an information session. The other municipalities are doing the same, and when we have that direction, we'll be able to revise those agreements, revise those contracts or the agreements and bring them back for sort of the final resolution to be passed. But there's an awful lot of moving pieces. It's complicated to do this in a single municipality, never mind 7. So there is an awful lot of moving pieces involved here. And, I can assure you that the CAO's group, the steering committee, is on top of this and talking about this daily and working towards that sort of end goal of here's the final, here's what it means with Whitestone's resolution. We don't know from McKellar yet, we don't know from Carling, we don't know from Seguin yet. So we need to resolve these pieces so that we can put the final package together.
Okay, thank you very much.
I see no further questions on governance. Councillor Osborne, is this related to governance?
Not to governance, it's related to fundraising, or am I out of line?
Yeah, the next topic is on the financial implications, which
Okay.
our chief financial officer will address, and fundraising comes much later.
Okay, so on the financial, because I have a question of Michelle on this. So giving the 25-year amortization, we're looking at a 1% tax increase for that period of time, Michelle. That's the financial impact. So, and there is a difference between debenturing it and versus using reserves. If we were to use, if we were to use reserves, that would deplete our reserves over time. And we typically at budget time top up our reserves if they are considered to be going down. So would that not have an implication on our budget as well, having to top up reserves if we in fact use reserve money?
There's 2 or 3 things there that you've put
I know.
into it. The $2 million is going to be an upfront thing. That's not going to be we can pull it out of reserves every year. That $2 million capital contribution will be upfront.
So would you recommend then, based on that, if it's an upfront 1 year done, would you recommend that we take the 2 million or roughly 2 million out of reserves one time and not replace them?
No, absolutely not. With the level of reserves that we have, you take $2 million out of that, and we are putting ourselves in serious, inflexible financial jeopardy.
So therefore, we would have to somehow top up that reserve to make up for it later.
You'd basically have to be putting that money back in very quickly.
Within 1 or 2 years, would you
Well,
suggest?
I would suggest really, it's honestly, in my professional opinion, that's not even an option. Because
So you would rather debenture?
all you're doing is taking that $2 million away from every other capital project that we've got.
Robbing Peter to pay Paul. Best not to use reserves.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Are there any other, Councillor Moffat?
I think I know the answer because I've done the math. So our average residential property value is about $500,000
That's correct.
based on the current math that we're doing.
Based on
So-
2021 numbers, that's correct.
And that presumes no increase in rate base. That also presumes no increase in properties, that may come to fruition 3-5 years down the road. That is basically a status quo as of today, what we know.
That's correct.
Okay, so have we done any forward thinking to see what any sort of financial implication would be if Seguin Township itself grew, not only for rate base, but also for additional homes in the neighborhood?
Not specifically for this, because the numbers are really so, you can't really say what those numbers are going to be right now. This is more of a scope thing. And you would really hope that if it's 500,000 now, the average is going to be 600,000, for example, in 10 years, but that dollar amount is going to go down per household.
Right, but we would also hope that we've grown our residential value or residential units from I'm making up a number from 2,000 to 3,500 over a certain period of time, and therefore we're also, reducing the individual impact at the same time.
It's just, it's not that big of a number. For example, that stuff run that I told council about at the last council meeting, that was about $30 million worth of assessment.
Right.
And for our 3.7 billion in assessment, it's just such a small amount. So.
But if we're looking optimistically, we would,
Yes, optimistically, this would be kind of the outside number, and we would hope that it would start to go down.
Right. Okay. Thank you. I just want to make that clear, is that this is currently, but there is lots of growth available in different areas that we can utilize, or that could come to fruition, that would help on a cost basis, once the facility is up and running, not only for usage, but also for spreading the dollar amount. So thank you.
I think what you see from Michelle is, here's where we are today, and that growth is at this point speculative at best, but we all wish for it.
Mm-hmm.
And Your Worship, I don't mind adding on that, Michelle makes the point that the $2 million capital investment, that's coming, pretty quick here, like really quite quickly. But when we start to talk about things like the operating impacts, in all fairness, if everybody said go and we were 100% go today, there isn't a shovel in the ground for a year, and then it's a 2-year construction period. It's 3 years before we get to actually feeling those operating impacts. And of course, when we get a little closer, and as I mentioned before, when we're considering future budgets, we may look at sort of an ease-in period where perhaps we take on a third of that impact in the first year, another third the second year, and as we approach that operating day where we open the doors, we would have the means in place at that time, and perhaps even a little bit of reserve money put away before we get to opening. But those details will come out, and those are Seguin-specific details, and our intent would be to bring those forward as part of a future budget consideration.
And there's also, when we get into fundraising, there's the possibility of creating an endowment to fund operating going forward. So there are many pieces that could assist with operations. Now I see a hand up from Councillor Moffat. Before I acknowledge it, do any of the councillors that have not spoken on the financial implications have anything to add? Councillor Moffat, one more time.
Yes, it's not a question, it's more of a comment. And this comes back to some of the noise that we've heard, or some of the, angst that some people have had. There's two different models here. There is the project model, which Jason has spoken to about, we have a cap right now of 32 million. Some refinements need to be done to fit under that envelope. But then there's the financing model, which is each individual township. I know that there's been some comments that, why aren't those sort of joined at the hip and everything else, but they are two different models. How it gets financed is one thing based on a municipality, and how, the project itself gets spent is two different things. And I know there's some refinements to be done in both of them, but I just want to clarify that, because a lot of people try to combine the two. Thank you.
Okay, so I see no further questions on the financial implications. Thank you, Michelle, for laying out what could and couldn't be. And we'll just briefly talk on fundraising, because it's really at a concept stage until all the municipalities step forward. But are there any comments on the fundraising specifically? No? I see none. I'll open it up one more time to any other questions before we move into our closed session. Oh, sorry, Councillor Osborne. You're muted, Councillor Osborne.
Sorry, this is not related to fundraising, although typically fundraising is done before a project gets started in order to know what the net costs are going to be. This fundraising seems to be sort of after the fact. However, that's neither here nor there at this point. My question is regarding if the project, due to projected costs through detailed costing and engineering, is over and above the 32 million and needs to be pared down, and some facilities pared down in favor of others, possibly multipurpose rooms versus 6 lanes instead of 4. What body makes that decision, Jason?
Once the Municipal Services Board is established, the Municipal Services Board is accountable for construction and operations, so the Municipal Services Board would be the
Okay.
body that makes that decision.
Thank you. Thanks.
And before we move into closed, I'd just like to register that I'm of the opinion that 6 lanes are an essential piece of this. I think you can add saunas and maybe even splash pads and tennis courts, but you can't add 2 more lanes.
No.
And I am strongly in favor of going for the 6 lanes and maybe reverse engineering some other things out of it that could be on a longer term addition plan. So that's where I stand as a mayor. So I have a motion that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby proceed to a closed meeting at 4:24 p.m. in order to address matters pertaining to a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board for the West Perry Sound Pool and Recreation Project. Could I have a motion from Councillor Osborne?
So moved, Mayor.
Thank you. And seconded by Councillor Fellner.
I second that, Mayor.
All in favor of moving into closed? Thank you, and I think we need to give Andrea a moment to get the